Before you come alive, life is nothing. It is up to you to give it a meaning, and value is nothing else but the meaning that you choose. What is life but an unpleasant interruption to a peaceful non-existence? The worst part about being lied to is knowing you weren't worth the truth. Every word has consequences. Every silence, too. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. If you are lonely when you're alone, you are in bad company. Only the guy who isn't rowing has time to rock the boat. I can always choose, but I ought to know that if I do not choose, I am still choosing. There may be more beautiful times, but this one is ours. Man is nothing else but what he purposes. He exists only insofar as he realizes himself. He is therefore nothing else but the sum of his actions, nothing else but what his life is. Nothingness haunts being. Everything comes to us from others. To be is to belong to someone. He who asks a question is a fool for a minute. He who does not remains a fool forever. When you realize that by changing your perspective, big things can be seen as little things, it becomes much harder to worry about anything. Commitment is an act, not a word. Because we can imagine, we are free. Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. We make our own hell out of the people around us. I do not believe in God. His existence has been disproved by science. But in the concentration camp, I learned to believe in men. We only become what we are by the radical and deep-seated refusal of that which others have made of us. Death is a continuation of my life without me. Life has no meaning the moment you lose the illusion of being eternal. It's quite an undertaking to start loving somebody. You have to have energy, generosity, blindness. There is even a moment right at the start where you have to jump across an abyss. If you think about it, you don't do it. Commitment is an act, not a word. Everything has been figured out, except how to live. We do not judge the people we love. I respect orders, but I respect myself too, and I do not obey foolish rules made especially to humiliate me. Your judgment judges you and defines you. I am, I exist, I think, therefore I am because I think. Why do I think? I don't want to think anymore. I am because I think that I don't want to be. I think that because. Ugh. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Such is the first principle of existentialism. Imagination is not an empirical or superadded power of consciousness. It is the whole of consciousness as it realizes its freedom. I felt myself in a solitude so frightful that I contemplated suicide. What held me back was the idea that no one, absolutely no one, would be moved by my death, that I would be even more alone in death than in life. To know what life is worth, you have to risk it once in a while. Words are more treacherous and powerful than we think. I had found my religion. Nothing seemed more important to me than a book. I saw the library as a temple. There is only one day left, always starting over. It is given to us at dawn and taken away from us at dusk. Words are loaded pistols. In a word, man must create his own essence. It is in throwing himself into the world, suffering there, struggling there, that he gradually defines himself. Once we know and are aware, we are responsible for our action and our inaction. We can do something about it or ignore it. Either way, we are still responsible. I exist, that is all, and I find it nauseating. I'm going to smile, and my smile will sink down into your pupils, and heaven knows what it will become. In life, man commits himself and draws his own portrait, outside of which there is nothing. No doubt this thought may seem harsh to someone who has not made a success of his life. But on the other hand, it helps people to understand that reality alone counts, and that dreams, expectations, and hopes only serve to define a man as a broken dream, aborted hopes, and futile expectations. I never could bear the idea of anyone's expecting something from me. It always made me want to do just the opposite. Man is fully responsible for his nature and his choices. Man can will nothing unless he has first understood that he must count on no one but himself, that he is alone, abandoned on earth in the midst of his infinite responsibilities, without help, with no other aim than the one he sets himself, with no other destiny than the one he forges for himself on this earth. God is dead. Let us not understand by this that he does not exist or even that he no longer exists. He is dead. He spoke to us and is silent. We no longer have anything but his cadaver. Perhaps he slipped out of the world, somewhere else like the soul of a dead man. Perhaps he was only a dream. God is dead. To choose not to choose is still to act. I hate victims who respect their executioners. I will not be modest. Humble as much as you like, but not modest. Modesty is the virtue of the lukewarm. Fascism is not defined by the number of its victims, but by the way it kills them. Once freedom lights its beacon in man's heart, the gods are powerless against him. I want to leave, to go somewhere where I should be really in my place, where I would fit in. But my place is nowhere. I am unwanted. You are, your life, and nothing else. I have no religion, but if I were to choose one, it would be that of Shariati's. What the painter adds to the canvas are the days of his life. The adventure of living, hurtling toward death. All I can do is make the best of what I am, become accustomed to it, evaluate the possibilities, and take advantage of them the best I can. We do not know what we want, and yet we are responsible for what we are. That is the fact. The best work is not what is most difficult for you, it is what you do best. We are possessed by the things we possess. When I like an object, I always give it to someone. It isn't generosity, it's only because I want others to be enslaved by objects, not me. What is boredom? It is when there is simultaneously too much and not enough. The individual's duty is to do what he wants to do, to think whatever he likes, to be accountable to no one but himself, to challenge every idea and every person. What do we mean by saying that existence precedes essence? We mean that man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world and defines himself afterward. In wanting freedom, we discover that it depends entirely on the freedom of others, and that the freedom of others depends on ours. I am obliged to want others to have freedom at the same time that I want my own freedom. I can take freedom as my goal only if I take that of others as a goal as well. Why do you keep maintaining your ideas are right if you can't prove them? The aim of language is to communicate, to impart to others the results one has obtained. As I talk, I reveal the situation, I reveal it to myself and to others in order to change it. If you want to deserve hell, you need only stay in bed. The world is iniquity. If you accept it, you are an accomplice. If you change it, you are an executioner. Man can will nothing unless he has first understood that he must count on no one but himself. I am going to outlive myself. Eat, sleep, sleep, eat. Exist slowly, softly, like these trees, like a puddle of water, like the red bench in the streetcar. Man is not the sum of what he has already, but rather the sum of what he does not yet have, of what he could have. Violence is good for those who have nothing to lose. 3 o'clock is always too late or too early for anything you want to do. I am alone in the midst of these happy, reasonable voices. All these creatures spend their time explaining, realizing happily that they agree with each other. In heaven's name, why is it so important to think the same things all together? In football, everything is complicated by the presence of the opposite team. Politics is a science. You can demonstrate that you are right and that others are wrong. He was free in every way, free to behave like a fool or a machine, free to accept, free to refuse, free to equivocate, to marry, to give up the game, to drag this death weight about with him for years to come. He could do what he liked. No one had the right to advise him. There would be for him no good or evil unless he thought them into being. What is meant here by saying that existence precedes essence? It means first of all, man exists, turns up, appears on the scene, and, only afterwards, defines himself. If man, as the existentialist conceives him, is indefinable, it is because at first he is nothing. Only afterward will he be something, and he himself will have made what he will be. There are two ways of destroying a people. Either condemn them en bloc or force them to repudiate the leaders they adopted. The second is the worse. I am no longer sure of anything. If I satiate my desires, I sin, but I deliver myself from them. If I refuse to satisfy them, they infect the whole soul. Life gave me everything I asked if all I asked was not a great deal. That's my problem. Every existing thing is born without reason, prolongs itself out of weakness, and dies by chance. He loves me. He doesn't love my bowels. If they showed him my appendix in a glass, he wouldn't recognize it. He's always feeling me. But if they put the glass in his hands, he wouldn't touch it. He wouldn't think, that's hers. You ought to love all of somebody, the esophagus, the liver, the intestines. Maybe we don't love them because we aren't used to them, but if we saw them the way we saw our hands and arms, maybe we'd love them. The starfish must love each other better than we do. He walked on in silence, the solitary sound of his footsteps echoing in his head, as in a deserted street at dawn. His solitude was so complete, beneath a lovely sky as mellow and serene as a good conscience, amid that busy throng, that he was amazed at his own existence. He must be somebody else's nightmare, and whoever it was would certainly awaken soon. Once you hear the details of victory, it is hard to distinguish it from a defeat. As far as men go, it is not what they are that interests me, but what they can become. Evil is the product of the ability of humans to make abstract that which is concrete. Nothing happens while you live. The scenery changes, people come in and go out, that's all. There are no beginnings. Days are tacked onto days without rhyme or reason, an interminable, monotonous addition. Consciousness is a being the nature of which is to be conscious of the nothingness of its being. If I became a philosopher, if I have so keenly sought this fame for which I'm still waiting, it's all been to seduce women basically. My thought is me, that's why I can't stop. I exist because I think. And I can't stop myself from thinking. At this very moment it's frightful if I exist, it is because I am horrified at existing. I am the one who pulls myself from the nothingness to which I aspire. There are two types of poor people, those who are poor together and those who are poor alone. The first are the true poor, the others are rich people out of luck. I do not think, therefore, I am a mustache, I exist. It is soft, so slow. And light, it seems as though it suspends in the air. It moves. A kiss without a mustache, they said then, is like an egg without salt. I will add to it, and it is like good without evil. People who live in society have learned how to see themselves, in mirrors, as they appear to their friends. I have no friends. Is that why my flesh is so naked? One of the chief motives of artistic creation is certainly the need of feeling that we are essential in relationship to the world. The absurd man will not commit suicide. He wants to live, without relinquishing any of his certainty, without a future, without hope, without illusions. And without resignation either. He stares at death with passionate attention, and this fascination liberates him. He experiences the divine irresponsibility of the condemned man. That's what existence means, draining one's own self dry without the sense of thirst. She believed in nothing, only her skepticism kept her from being an atheist. The viable jewels of life remain untouched when man forgets his vocation of searching for the truth of his existence. To believe is to know you believe, and to know you believe is not to believe. Acting is a question of absorbing other people's personalities and adding some of your own experience. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. A lost battle is a battle one thinks one has lost. Naturally, in the course of my life I have made lots of mistakes, large and small, for one reason or another, but at the heart of it all, every time I made a mistake it was because I was not radical enough. It's the well-behaved children that make the most formidable revolutionaries. They don't say a word, they don't hide under the table, they eat only one piece of chocolate at a time. But later on, they make society pay dearly. Two people can form a community by excluding a third. The poor don't know that their function in life is to exercise our generosity. An individual chooses and makes himself, and is condemned to be free. Condemned, because he did not create himself, in other respect is free, because, once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. The existentialist does not believe in the power of passion. He will never agree that a sweeping passion is a ravaging torrent which fatally leads a man to certain acts and is therefore an excuse. He thinks that man is responsible for his passion. I am beginning to believe that nothing can ever be proved. These are honest hypotheses which take the facts into account, but I sense so definitely that they come from me, and that they are simply a way of unifying my own knowledge. Not a glimmer comes from Rolbon's side. Slow, lazy, sulky, the facts adapt themselves to the rigor of the order I wish to give them, but it remains outside of them. I have the feeling of doing a work of pure imagination. I suppose it is out of laziness that the world is the same day after day. Today it seemed to want to change. And then anything could happen. I tell you in truth, all men are prophets, or else God does not exist. We are now in a position to understand the anti-Semite. He is a man who is afraid. Not of the Jews, to be sure, but of himself, of his own consciousness, of his liberty, of his instincts, of his responsibilities, of solitariness, of change, of society, and of the world, of everything except the Jews. If you die, I will lie down beside you, and I will stay there until the end. Without eating or drinking, you will rot in my arms, and I will love you as carcass, for you love nothing if you do not love everything. There are two kinds of existentialists. First, those who are Christian, and on the other hand, the atheistic existentialists, among whom I class myself. What they have in common is that they think that existence precedes essence, or, if you prefer, that subjectivity must be the turning point. We cannot withdraw our cards from the game. Were we as silent and mute as stones, our very passivity would be an act. It is certain that we cannot escape anguish, for we are anguish. It would be much better if I could only stop thinking. Thoughts are the dullest things. Duller than flesh. They stretch out and there's no end to them, and they leave a funny taste in the mouth. Then there are words, inside the thoughts, unfinished words, a sketchy sentence which constantly returns. It goes. And there's no end to it. It's worse than the rest because I feel responsible and have complicity in it. For example, this sort of painful rumination, I exist, I am the one who keeps it up. Our responsibility is much greater than we might have supposed, because it involves all mankind. Photographs are not ideas. They give us ideas. How can I, who was not able to retain my own past, hope to save that of another? Man must be invented each day. You must be like me. You must suffer in rhythm. Life is nothing until it is lived. But it is yours to make sense of, and the of it is nothing other than the sense you choose. One cannot become a saint when one works 16 hours a day. Every age has its own poetry, and every age the circumstances of history choose a nation, a race, a class to take up the torch by creating situations that can be expressed or transcended only through poetry. To think new thoughts you have to break the bones in your head is in this sense that I no longer know what to do with my life must be understood. Critics have been mistaken about the meaning of this phrase, seeing in it a cry of despair, as in Simone de Beauvoir's I Have Been Cheated. When she uses this word, it is to indicate that she claims from life an absolute which she cannot find there. One is still what one is going to cease to be, and already what one is going to become. One lives one's death, one dies one's life. Uncalled for aggression arouses the hatred of the civilian population. One does not adopt a new idea, one slips into it. Objects should not touch because they are not alive. You use them, put them back in place, you live among them, they are useful, nothing more. But they touch me, it is unbearable. I am afraid of being in contact with them as though they were living beasts. With despair, true optimism begins, the optimism of the man who expects nothing, who knows he has no rights and nothing coming to him, who rejoices in counting on himself alone and in acting alone for the good of all. I wanted pure love, foolishness. To love one another is to hate a common enemy. I will thus espouse your hatred. I wanted good, nonsense. On this earth and in these times, good and bad are inseparable. I accept to be evil in order to become good. Smooth and smiling faces everywhere, but ruin in their eyes. There were days when you peered into yourself, into the secret places of your heart, and what you saw there made you faint with horror. And then, next day, you didn't know what to make of it. You couldn't interpret the horror you had glimpsed the day before. Yes, you know what evil costs. When you live alone, you no longer know what it is to tell a story. The plausible disappears at the same time as the friends. You let events flow by too. You suddenly see people appear who speak and then go away. You plunge into stories of which you can't make head or tail. You'd make a terrible witness. I had realized in the meantime that action too has its difficulties, and that one can also be led to it by neurosis. We are not saved by politics any more than by literature. There is no salvation anywhere. The idea of salvation implies the idea of an absolute. One can ask why the I has to appear in the cogito, since the cogito, if used rightly, is the awareness of pure consciousness, not directed at any fact or action. In fact, the I is not necessary here, since it is never united directly to consciousness. One can even imagine a pure and self-aware consciousness which thinks of itself as impersonal spontaneity. A madman's ravings are absurd in relation to the situation in which he finds himself, but not in relation to his madness. Outside nature, against nature, without excuse, beyond remedy, except what remedy I find within myself. I think there is an enormous difference between speaking and writing. One rereads what one writes, but one might read it slowly or quickly. In other words, you do not know how long you will have to spend deliberating over a sentence. But if I listen to a tape recorder, the listening time is determined by the speed at which the tape turns and not by my own needs. I construct my memories with my present. I am lost, abandoned in the present. I try in vain to rejoin the past. I cannot escape. I will take it all, tongs, molten lead, prongs, garrotes, all that burns, all that tears. I want to truly suffer. Better 100 bites, better the whip, vitriol, than this suffering in the head, this ghost of suffering which grazes and caresses and never hurts enough. What then did you expect when you unbound the gag that muted those black mouths? That they would chant your praises? Did you think that when those heads that our fathers had forcibly bowed down to the ground were raised again, you would find adoration in their eyes? Because the Nazi venom worked its way even into our thoughts, every accurate thought was a conquest. Because an all-powerful police sought to force us into silence, every word became as precious as a declaration of principle. Because we were persecuted, each of our gestures carried the weight of a commitment. A writer must refuse to allow himself to be transformed into an institution, even if it takes place in the most honorable form. There is no human nature, since there is no God to conceive it. As for the square at Nothingness, where I used to go every day, it's even simpler. I do not see it at all anymore. All that remains is the vague feeling that it was charming, and these 5 words that are indivisibly bound together, a charming square at Nothingness. I don't see anything anymore. I can search the past in vain. I can only find these scraps of images, and I am not sure what they represent, whether they are memories or just fiction. For the moment, the jazz is playing. There is no melody, just notes, a myriad tiny tremors. The notes know no rest. An inflexible order gives birth to them, then destroys them, without ever leaving them the chance to recuperate and exist for themselves. I would like to hold them back, but I know that, if I succeeded in stooping one, there would only remain in my hand a corrupt and languishing sound. I must accept their death. I must even want that death. I know a few more bitter or intense impressions. As for me, I am mean. That means that I need the suffering of others to exist. A flame in their hearts. When I am all alone, I am extinguished. For the time being, I have seen enough of living things, of dogs, of men, of all flabby masses which move spontaneously. I committed the first crime by creating men as mortals. After that, what more could you do, you the murderers? Come on, they already had death in them. At most you simply hasten things a little. Nothingness lies coiled in the heart of beings like a worm. Let it crumble. Let the rocks revile me and flowers wilt at my coming. Your whole universe is not enough to prove me wrong. You are the king of gods, king of stones and stars, king of the waves of the sea. But you are not the king of man. A man is always a teller of tales. He lives surrounded by his stories and the stories of others. He sees everything that happens to him through them, and he tries to live his life as if he were recounting it. This is what I thought. For the most banal, even to become an adventure, you must begin to recount it. This is what fools people. A man is always a teller of tales. He sees everything that happens to him through them, and he tries to live his own life as if he were telling a story. But you have to choose, live or tell. For the artist, the color, the bouquet, the tinkling of the spoon on the saucer are things in the highest degree. He stops at the quality of the sound or the form. He returns to it constantly and is enchanted with it. There are photographers who push for war because they make stories. They search for a Chinese who has a more Chinese than the others, and they end up finding one.